Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collinwood for YouTube, and I'm here to do Chapter 5 of To Benight and Beguile. So, Chapter 5 is called The Window. The fog lifted early on the day before the wedding. The sun shined down through the high clouds and kissed the rolling hills of Welshport Island, like a passionate lover seeing their premier after a long trip home. Walking through the estate's lush gardens, Evie and her soon-to-be husband, Sebastian, made small talk amongst the various flowers and plants. With tiny ruffles around the collar, he grabbed her hand that was covered with itchy lace and brought her to a stone bench where they sat their thighs pressing against each other, a moment of innocent intimacy that had yet to come. Everything here is so beautiful, Evie said, opening her parasol. The gardens are over 100 years old. My great grandfather personally curated the design. His own sort of Versailles. It was really his best attribute. Sebastian said as his black cloak with garden tassels dragged over the wee grass. Let's say the wet grass. Oh, Evie wondered. My grandfather Albert told us stories about his father, who he called the landscaper. He was an awful drunk, but had an eye for gardens. It was sort of his way of escaping the world around him. You can imagine the island is, those days, much more remote and desolate. There was only this house, a bit of the village, and the lighthouse. Sebastian explained. The lighthouse, Evie asked, her curiosity perking up Sebastian's mouth. He could see just how excited she really was being in a place he called home, and it was a genuine excitement. Although she was in a strange new world, far away from home, all she wanted to do was accumulate and be a part of this new family. No matter what, no strange bite from a child or frightening nightmare would stop her from taking on what she was told had to happen. Her love for Sebastian, albeit rushed, was sincere, and his to her. You have a lot to see of Welshport. It's actually a wonderful place. I grew up, obviously, in a very gilded cage. I got out once in a while to see the world, but I always came back. I was like the others, Sebastian said, mentioning the other Lord family members, but stopping short of saying his missing father's name, who over the years left the island never to return. I know what it must be have been very difficult for you when your mother died of influenza. It's a terrible disease. I've seen it when it in a terrible fashion in London. Seeing your mother so sick must have been so painful, she said, hoping to console him. Well, yes, very painful, he said softly, trying to keep up the lie of his mother's true death. She reached for the label of his jacket and carefully flattened it, a sign of tenderness, a sign that she was there for him in any way possible, even if the real reason of his mother's death was something much more sinister and not an illness, a secret that she knew was but but was going to along with his and his family's lie. It was clear to her that Sebastian didn't want to talk about his mother in any detailed way. He was sort of her, or sorry, he was short with her on the subject. Years of training from Rebecca taught him that only the most inner circle of the family should speak on the matters of Sabrina's death. In true form, and even if Evie was going to soon be a member of the inner circle, she had yet to say her vows. She was still an outsider, even to Sebastian, who was quickly falling in love. To divert her from the topic of his mother's death, that would most likely turn to his father's disappearance, he quickly changed the subject by flashing a giant smile across his face as he suddenly stood up and looked out towards the large thick forest that surrounded the gardens of the mansion. Over out that way are the North Shore cliffs, beautiful for sunrises, he said, pointing towards the eastern end horizon. North Shore, Evie giggled. That's the east. Sebastian grabbed hold. Sebastian grabbed hold of her hand and began walking with her. He laughed too of the named cliffside. I know, I know. When the Welsh first settled here, they tried to create confusing naming conventions for part of the island to keep foreign invaders away, he explained. It's not working on me, his new bride blushed. Good, he replied, lit up with a grin. They continued on their walk, and Sebastian pointed out more of the island to the new inhabitant. And out that way are the western woods, the real west, he laughed. No one really goes there except for hunters. And to the south, more of the Terramere forest. Our house was named after the forest that helped build it. My ancestors brought down close to 1,000,000 trees and later replanted them all around the house to keep it as exclusively in the forest as they could. Let's see. Yes. At the very edge of the forest, there's a tiny little point of the land where the lighthouse is. It points to the south and shines down on Good Island. Good Island? It's a small sort of tree-filled island just floating off Welshport. Not very interesting, he said. And the lighthouse? She asked, smiling ear to ear, allowing her thoughts of keeping such a tragic secret still locked away in her mind. Ah, I can see you're interested, he gleamed. One day I'll take you there, Sebastian said as a cool ocean breeze brushed across their wool cloaks. Evie could see and feel his enthusiasm. I'd love it, she exclaimed. Welshport is your home now. I hope you're happy here. It's all I can do to make you happy. Our family, our business, everything is for you now, too, Sebastian said as he stepped closer to his fiancée, the cold breeze from the ocean air swirling around him. There is something I want to tell you about, something that happened, Evie said, standing from the garden stone bench. It happened last night. What is it? Sebastian asked. Evie took a deep breath, trying to compose herself and to figure out how she could tell Sebastian that his little cousin Charlotte visited her in the middle of the night and that she saw a strangeness in the girl's reflection. He could he could see she say that this without how could she say this, sorry, without sounding completely mad. She took another breath and closed her parasol and looked into his eyes, hoping that he could see in them her sincerity and honesty. Charlotte was in my room last night, in the middle of the night. She was watching me sleep, and I woke up and she was just there, staring Evie said. What? Oh, Evie, I'm so sorry. That is bizarre. You know, she hasn't been herself lately. She really doesn't behave this way. Did she say anything to you? He asked. She did, Evie replied. I'm prepared to tell him what Charlotte said. What did she say? She was actually very sweet. I shouldn't make you worry about it. It was just a strange feeling to have her there. Maybe I shouldn't have said anything, Evie said, now feeling awkward with her news of Charlotte's late night visit and still not telling Sebastian the strangest part of the visit, the reflection. No, not at all. I'll have grandmother speak to her. Jacob has a tendency to let her do as she wishes. Grandmother is more stern. It won't happen again, but I hope whatever she said didn't upset you, Sebastian asked, gripping Evie's itchy, lacy gloved hand. No, no, it's silly. It's fine, Evie said, rethinking telling Sebastian about her strange encounter with young Charlotte. Maybe she's just feeling nervous about all the excitement of the wedding. Besides, it was so late at night I could have Im- imagined her there longer than she really was. Forget it, really, Evie added, feeling foolish for even bringing it up. Sebastian smiled. Her beauty only paled in comparison to her kind heart. He could see how special she was, how wonderful she was, and how eager she was to be one of the family, no matter how many strange things happened to her in a very short time. She was on the island. He pulled her close, so close they could feel the warmth of their breath on the exposed skin of their bodies. She looked into his eyes, he looked into her. "You're beautiful," he whispered as the waves from the cold be heard crashing off in the distance. Then he grabbed her by the wrist and pulled her to his body. She lifted her head and he bowed his head, and their lips met, connecting in a passionate kiss surrounded by roses and lilies and plants of every variety and color of the rainbow. Staring out into the garden, watching from 3 stories up in her private mansion apartments with Rebecca Lord, the mistress of Terramore House, she lifted a brow at the young couple out in the lush yard, cuddling each other in the color ocean breeze. A sense of uneasy frost filled her veins as she watched her grandson put his black cloak over Evie's shoulders to warm her. She was worried about what Evie really knew of the family secret, what Evie really thought of her place in the family, and of worse, the ugly tarot card reading just days before the Gasper held for her. "Pull the drapes, Georgina. It must be completely dark here. No light from outside must come in. Do you understand? No light. We must let the spirits find themselves here in the dark." Rebecca ordered her personal maid, who quickly curtsied and rushed around, pulling a large, dark olive green drapes that covered the floor to ceiling double windows in the room, while the maid hurried around the perimeter of the room, pulling long cords across the windows that dragged the drapes too close. Rebecca, in her dark plum-colored dress, shuffled past a large bureau with a silver tray that was burning a bundle of sage to a small card table in the center of the room, draped in a black velvet table cloth with a small tin cup filled with holy water. Rebecca dipped her fingers in the holy water and then crossed herself, mouthing in the name of the Father, the Son, and Holy Spirit. While she waited, Rebecca nervously fidgeted with a golden ring with a single pearl in its center. Her eyes blue. It strained in all her 65 years. Rebecca, or sorry, 65 years, focused on the man in front of her at the table. Rebecca, mystical healer, Gasper Dubious. He was there to read her cards again, like he did so often. He was at beck and call. He was her guide in life. He carried her suffering and torture of family secrets in his hands with the visions he had, with the stories he knew through the revelations of his ancient tarot cards. Earlier that morning, Rebecca insisted he come into her room and add more information about Evie and the Red River of Blood card Gasper pulled just before her arrival in Welshport. It had haunted Rebecca for days. He certainty over whose life was truly in danger now that Evie was in Welshport, and why was this dancer so connected to Evie? Gasper caressed the soft folds of the black tablecloth and smiled at Rebecca, who stayed completely silent until Georgina finished closing the drapes. He leaned over and lit a match. The flame flickered and kissed the wicks of the 2 thick white candles on the table that illuminated Rebecca's that shaped face with the white hair like spotlight, finding its stare on stage. Finding its star on stage. "I need to know more. My family's whole existence I need to know more. My family's whole existence depends on it, she said dramatically in soft voice to Gasper just as Georgina pulled the last strip. Madam, I know how you have not slept. This is truly concerning to me. I can assure you, but forcing the spirits to come up with answers on so many occasions can exhaust them. The messages they send can then become, he paused, now when the flickering candle splashed orange light on his beautiful French and physique skin. Trumpers, he said in his native French. Becca Flaunt in the language rolled her eyes. Meston, she replied, definitely in French to his suggestion that the spirit messages would become trumpers, misleading. I insist on this, whatever you can tell me, whatever I can know, she added. Gasper took a deep breath and reached in his vest without even breaking eye contact. With his madam. He removed a stack of golden colored tarot cards and split the deck in half, reluctantly forced. Then he motioned for Rebecca to break each half stack in half again. Georgina, the dark-haired maid, watched intently with her crystal blue eyes, never leaving the cards in front of her. Vala Rebecca as she finished the cutting. Gasper flipped one card from each of the four halves. The first card, the Seven Swords. The second card, the Crowned Maiden. The third card, the Lost Knight. And the final card, strongly again, the Red River. The Seven Swords tells us that the word has changed. Observe, madam, on how each sword points inward and the ground. The spirits are telling us that thought this image that something from inside of us is, all of us, is what we must keep watch over. There is danger that lurks in us all. We are all our own enemy. The crowned maid symbolizes the spirit's way to tell us a special woman, childlike, is fair, is the catalyst of this strange in the world. Gasper explained as the light from the candles continued to glow. Eve, Rebecca whispered in a matter-of-fact tone. Perhaps, Gaspar continued, the Lost Knight is truly a painful way to get to the Red River. This has not changed since I first pulled these for you, madam. Before it was just a card of the drowned prince. Today, the Lost Knight, each followed by the Red River. There is no doubt in my mind that the spirits who surround me now and are telling us so clearly that Evie will be Sebastian's downfall. Georgina gasped in shock. Hush, Rebecca scolded. But why? Why is she such a thorn in our family? We chose her, Sebastian. She was to be the woman with the woman white born my grandson's children, the future of the Lord family. She knows too much, madam. As I said, you must take matters into your own hands and finally remove her knowledge of what she learned on the ship before she arrived. If she is allowed to know this information any further, no matter how many ways anyone's tried to avert her thoughts on the matter of David and Sabrina, it will be to spell disaster. The secret will fester, it will rot in her mind and affect her whole being like a tooth dying in the mouth. In the end, madam, the secret left open in her mind like a sore will eat away at their marriage with Sebastian. Rebecca exhaled deeply. Her whole heart was invested in making sure her only grandson, the heir to his father's part of the Lord family fortune, was happy. She could not see his life employee not like this. The secret of David murdering Sabrina has to be kept. What must I do? Rebecca asked as Georgina looked on again in shock. The older woman would even entertain the idea of involving herself in anything illicit. Gasper lifted a brow and said, You must take the crystal and do as I said. Remove this memory from her brain before it's too late. The dark room felt swollen with warm, stale air. from the windows being closed off the floating heart from the heavy candles on the table in front of Gaspar and Rebecca. The air was choking in its thickness. Georgina felt almost faint, and her hands became clammy, sweaty. Rebecca grabbed hold of the crystal and looked as it dangled its red cord. The light from the candles broke through the crystal, allowing fragments of light in the shape of tiny squares to reflect onto Rebecca's soft face. Her eyes were staring deep into a cut of the crystal. The feeling of dread for Sabrina swimming in her mind, and Sebastian in her mind, and Gaspar warning still ringing in her ear. "You'll show me how?" she asked. Gaspar smiled, his crooked teeth sending shivers up Rebecca's tightly corseted spine. He snatched the crystal from Rebecca's hand and stood up in the darkroom. "You maid lay here," he told Georgina, who looked over at Rebecca to move her from standing spot by the door to soft velvet and silk cushioned sofa in the room. Rebecca gestured in a way affirming to Georgina that it was okay, and she went quickly over to the sofa and laid down. Gaspar then stood over her and dangled the crystal over Georgina's eyes. "I want you to look deep into the crystal, Georgina. Let the fragments of light fill your mind and take you into a deep sleep. Just follow my voice into a soft place in your mind. Can you do that?" Jasper asked. Georgina said yes as Rebecca looked on in her lesson. "Good girl. Now keep your eye on the crystal. Watch as the light breaks inside and turns into tiny little flashes in your mind. Keep your eye on the crystal. Watch it turn your mind inside out and go where I tell you to go." Gaspar added to Georgina's information. "She looks dazed," Rebecca said to Jasper, and turned quickly to her and hushed her. "Georgina, I am now in control of your mind and body. Get up and walk," he said. Georgina, the maid, did as he said. Her eyes glazed over in a frozen-like state. She rested her arms, tucking them at her waist, where a white flowing blouse was tucked into a dark brown skirt that went all the way to the floor. "Walk with me, follow my voice," Gaspar ordered. Georgina complied. Together, Gaspar and Georgina, in her hypnotic trance, walked over to the large black out window covered to the olive green drapes. Gaspar pulled the long cord, and the drapes opened halfway, revealing a large window and a peat of bright light. Still at the table, Rebecca stood up, her eyes glued to what was happening in front of her with her personal maid. "Open the window, Georgina," Gaspar ordered. Georgina, frozen in a hypnotic daze, complied and pulled a small iron lock on the window and slowly opened the window. A flow of cold air rushed in and touched her face. She winced, but remained in a daze. Gaspar, Rebecca whispered, unsure of what was to come next. "Step on the ledge, Georgina," he ordered. Georgina lifted her leg and stepped onto the ledge of the window. It was 3 stories up. It was a 250-foot drop to the grounds below. The wind blew her at her skirt. The wind blew in her hair. "Step off the ledge, Georgina," Gaspar ordered again. Show his full control of the maid's mind. With her right foot, Georgina dangled it over the window ledge, and just as fast as a cool breeze could flow, and Rebecca came from behind her and yanked her back into the room in a quick lunge, tossing the young maid to the floor, breaking her hypnosis. What happened?" Georgina said, feeling the flush and cold and hot at the same time. Then she remembered she was not under hypnosis long enough for the full memory of what had occurred to disappear. "You've made your point," Rebecca said, grabbing the powerful crystal from Gaspar's hand as he smirked over the terrified Georgina. "It's that simple, madam. Once you control Evie's mind, you could take make her do whatever you want, from jumping out a window to forgetting what she knows, he said sinisterly. I don't feel well. I feel very unwell, ma'am, the pale and sweaty Georgina said. Rebecca turned to her maid and saw that the hypnosis, what the hypnosis did. It was strong, it was very powerful, and she was not only terrified of it, but in absolute love of it. The matriarch of the Lord family looked in her hand and saw the crystal, then looked at the panic-stricken Georgina. Lay down, Georgina. Let's fix your mind, Rebecca said. Georgina looked at her mistress and was unsure of what to do, but Rebecca knew she was about to test the crystal once again and erase poor Georgina's memory of her close encounter with death at the window. She would be her guinea pig, her prototype of what she would do next to Evie Jordan. The downstairs level of the Terramore house was bustling with butlers and maids and florists, all preparing for the coming wedding that would soon take place on the grounds of the mansion through the noise and business. A tall and slender butler ushered in a guest to meet with Jacob Lord in the much more quiet study near the rear of the house. The guest, Welshport Island locals constable Christian Evans, was in awe of what he saw of the interior of the mansion, a place he had never stepped foot in. On his way to the study, Christian saw the lengthy marble floors that were imported with Lisbon, the stone walls that were carefully molded and crafted in a cathedral-like style by the Italian architect who had been brought in by Jacob, great-great-grandfather, who built the mansion that, to Christian's surprise, was filled with light. Their echoing footsteps then led to a more private area of the house that was dramatically different than the marble and stone front. It was very much more quieter, carpeted with the finest Persian rugs, and fitted with electrical outlets and fixtures that were relatable new to the locals of the island. Christian looked at the several paintings of family members hung in golden frames along the tightly decorated corridor. It finally led to the back area study. The tall butler gestured to a tiny framed chair with a red plush seat. Wait here, please, constable. Christian sat there for what was only a few seconds. Then the study doors, heavy and oak, opened again. Mr. Lord will see you now, the butler said. Christian got up and entered the room where there were shelves upon shelves of books, and a sitting area next to the fireplace, filled with plums of Jacob's cigar smoke. Mr. Lord, Constable Christian Evans, the butler announced. Mr. Lord, Christian said quickly and awkwardly, bowing his head, a gesture he strangely felt appropriate in the pomp and circumstance of the whole meeting. Thank you, Marcus, Jacob said, excusing the butler and welcoming Christian to the room. Constable, please sit down. What do I owe this very personal visit? Christian sat across from Jacob, who sat back down on the dark green sofas in the center of the room that squat and scratched as their bodies came down on the perfectly toned leather. I wanted to confirm with the family that I'll be personally attending the wedding tomorrow for everyone's safety. An event this size in a place like this, I think that would be better for everyone to be here and make sure there is a sense of security for all involved, the constable said. Jacob's face turned stone cold. Christian meet with Jacob about the wedding. Jacob assures him everything will be fine. Christian insists that he will be there regardless. Jacob seems unhappy about that. The idea that the authorities from the village would be involved of any kind of family event was nothing but intrusive in the Lord family way of life. That's absolutely out of the question, Jacob retorted. Why is that, sir? Christian asked. This is a private event. There's no need for any kind of security presence such as yours. It would make our guests uncomfortable, Jacob said. I have full authority if I feel that the event as large needs my supervision. I assure you, Miss Lord, I won't be a bother. It's for your family's safety, Christian said. Safety, Jacob said with a lifted brow. That's correct. There is a reason you feel we are unsafe in our home, around our own friends, around our own family. Jacob wondered as he got up from the sitting area and walked over to a large desk near the window. Christian did not want to place fear in Jacob's mind, but his worry that Mary God might do something outrageous. It was also not very clear that she would do anything, but Celeste's encounter with Mary in town showed that there was still very heavily animosity from Mary towards the family. Everyone knew she believed had wronged her over her daughter's removal. I just think that it would be the best interest of everyone that I was here. I will be absolutely discreet and look as a guest. Nothing more, Christian said without giving away his true intention. Jacob turned toward the sunny windows and watched as the horses on their lands roamed around the secure enclosure. He lifted up his smoldering cigar and put it to his mouth and inhaled the burning end, scolded and stored with red burning tobacco. Then he exhaled it. It was like a huge puff of engine smoke from a train that swirled like clouds when Jacob turned back to Christian, who was now standing on the other side of the desk. Very well, but be discreet, Jacob said as his voice sounded unhappy with the idea, but allowing it. Thank you, sir. I will be, Christian said with a smile. I won't bother you any longer, and I'll see myself out. Jacob smiled snobbishly, but did not say goodbye. Christian quickly left the private study in the back of the mansion, made his way back into the busy front of the house just as Sebastian and Sabrina were coming in. This was a surprise. This was a surprise to the couple. Constable Evans, Sebastian said happily. The two men had been school chums as they grew up, friends but not close friends as their social classes did not align. Christian was always more of a quiet and polite young man, while Sebastian, who never attempted to push his family's wealth on his schoolmates as something to use against their more humble lifestyle, was much more outgoing and bodacious. Today, in seeing Christian after a very long time, his bodacious behavior was very evident in how he could not be. The most beautiful young fiancée was in his arm. Good to see you, Bash. How are you? And congratulations, Arnold, Christian said, motioning to Evie, who smiled shyly. Thank you, Constable Evans, Evangeline, Jordan, Evie, Christian. Sebastian said, introducing the two who exchanged how-to-dos. What are you doing here, Sebastian? One then asked. I think I'll be more comfortable if you call me Christian. Never had a problem with that before, Christian said, reminding Sebastian of their past friendship. Of course, of course. So again, Christian, why the visit from town? Sebastian said, I was here to see your uncle. A bit of business, nothing to worry about. Christian said, You're coming to the wedding, I assume? Sebastian asked. Well, yes, actually. That was the crux of my conversation with Jacob. I'll be there, Christian answered. Christian and I went to school together. We've been friends since we were just 6 or 7 years old, Sebastian said. Well, then, it'll be wonderful to see for you to have here old friends. Always making, always make wedding even that much more lovely, Evie said, squeezing Sebastian's arm. Indeed, Sebastian smiled. I should get back in the village now. Miss Jordan, it was a pleasure to meet you, Christian said, kissing the back of Evie's gloved hand. Likewise, Constable, she replied, with sparkling eyes at lock of Christian's, and that final gaze on each other. Christian finally saw how beautiful she really was, a stunning peach complexion with beautiful dark hair and eyes so blue that it felt almost like two pools of perfectly clear water from the shallows just below. The North Shore cliffs he felt butterflies in his stomach, and then noticed he was still holding her hand. She smiled awkwardly, and he quickly let go and rushed out toward the foyer. You have a way, Sebastian said, laughing to Evie, noticing his old friend's flustered look at the sight of the beautiful Evie Jordan. Back in the study, Jacob remained at his desk, smoldering like the cigar in his mouth. With Christian in attendance, a certain plan of his might not go on without a snag, but nothing was ever off the table. Jacob knew the wedding would take place no matter what. Then a sliding secret door of the study slid open. A figure stepped in silently and pushed the double door closed, concealing again the secret passage. The person slowly made their way to the brightly lit desk and cleared their throat. Jacob already knew who it was without even looking. What did he want? The person said, who said clearly, been listening from behind the secret door while Christian was visiting. You know what he wanted, Jacob replied, turning to see Gasper across from him. Is the plan in danger? Gasper said, his voice lacking the French accent he had always had, and now in a clear British voice, referencing a plan that he and Jacob secretly had been plotting. Jacob smiled cynically. Nothing would stop him from what he was planning. Nothing. Nothing. Not Christian, not Evie's knowledge of David and Sabrina's misfortune, and not even Rebecca, who had her own plan in place. Don't worry about Constable Evans. He won't stop us, Jacob said, puffing away at his cigar and opening a drawer from the desk and pulling out a silver and gold revolver. The Lord family was like a den of snakes, each one trying to bite the other for leverage and power. Jacob and Gaspar, the two most venomous snakes of the pit, were on track to bite and kill anyone on their path to full power, and the wedding was just the first step on their way to victory. Okay, so that's chapter 5 of To Be Night and Beguile. So you got Jacob and Gaspar who were planning some sinister shit. Jacob's a very, I would say, evil person. I sort of wonder though. I get they planned this together. My little, I guess, theory or sort of question would be, I'm sort of wondering, you know, if Gaspar saw the opportunity, would he stab Jacob in the back or vice versa? Very devious characters. So I love the character building here. You have two very devious characters, and you're not sure which one's the more evil of the two. Um, so it's going to be interesting to see and find out. I've not read chapter 6 yet. I'm going to read that. That's going to be my read along for tonight, guys. Um, so that was chapter 5 of To Be Night and Beguile. Link will be in the description box, guys.